Hello, Gina Horkey here with my friend Jason, and we are going to do kind of the final episode of this GLP-1 journey, at least looking back on the first 90 days. So, thanks again for being here. What do you think would be the most amazing outcome of this little recording, Jason?
I think the most amazing outcome would be the discovery of what the next steps would be, right? Because you started out with a lot of unknowns. Like we have our known knowns, we have our known unknowns, and we have our unknown unknowns. So just figuring out, oh, this could potentially work, this could potentially be something, and then you could create a little bit more structured roadmap for some other assumptions moving forward.
Yeah. So I started to get a lot of questions around this journey because I've obviously been openly sharing it and mainly just taking this Zoom recording and posting it to YouTube and then republishing to social media like Facebook and Instagram. And so it's been fun to hear what questions people have and their curiosity because, in my opinion, the Ozempic weight loss drug conversation has had kind of a negative connotation within the regular media outlets.
Mhm.
We heard, maybe a couple of years back already that we were taking the medications away from the diabetics that needed it. And I know that we've busted that myth, but I'll make sure to kind of give some context to that as well. So again, the media headlines were saying, hey, these weight loss drugs, normal people are taking them, and our diabetics are not receiving the drugs because there's a shortage. And when you unpack that and actually look beyond the headline, what was happening is they had these pre-filled dispenser pens that there was a shortage of. So it was a shortage, the way that I understand it, of plastic, of
Mhm.
this tool that was used to administer the medication. And again, it was just pre-measured by the drug companies. And so it wasn't the actual drug, which again is a peptide, something that we naturally produce in our body, that there's some theories that we might have a deficiency of, which is why people are taking these medications. And so I knew as a personal trainer, as a life coach, as somebody that's really interested in all things health and fitness, that this is probably going to be around to stay because we're always looking at new things to try in order to make getting to and maintaining a healthy weight and lifestyle as easy as possible and as quickly as possible. If we all could snap our fingers or wave that magic wand, we want the magic diet pill, right? And so
Mhm.
I thought, who better than to try and experiment on than myself? And I came into it feeling a little, we'll say fluffy, feeling a little like bloated and pretty certain that I had some internal inflammation, which bloating, inflammation in my mind are very similar things. There's probably a further definition diagnosis that we could unpack that I'm not
We
interested in.
could use Fluffy. Fluffy's good.
Fluffy is good. So not feeling very good in my own skin. Everybody knows that feeling, right? At least if you've been fit, if you've been lean, and I've gotten to the extreme of that, of getting stage lean as a bikini bodybuilding competitor. It can really be hard to go from that level to what's more normal and healthy for your body. And for those of you that don't know, the third time that I competed was just over a year ago. And I probably got so lean so fast, meaning my body fat percentage dropped, that I lost my cycle. So I was hormonally imbalanced.
Mhm.
Um, and that's one of the signs of that. And I felt like crap. So that's not fun either. So when I was running this experiment, I was not obese. I wasn't even overweight by the standards of the medical field. I was 159.2 pounds. I'm 5 foot 9 inches, and my body fat at that time was 21.7%. So respectable by all means. I would say that I was metabolically sound or fit, meaning that I was already used to eating a pretty good diet overall, although like the average American, it's easy to pick up things out of convenience, or I find that sugar can be a trigger, kind of an addictive substance for my brain and my body. So I decided to go on a 90-day experiment, and I went and met with Dr. Bradley Bush from Natural Medicine of Stillwater. If you're local, you can give him a call. You can say that I referred you. He tackles all the things. He's a licensed medical provider. And this is just somebody that I found that could help me with this experimentation. And so he offers a 90-minute consultation where you can go and talk about all of your ailments, which I find to be hugely helpful, especially in the society that we live in today, where every doctor that you go to, your normal care provider, has 10 minutes maybe to spend with you. And anything that's outside of the scope of that visit that you scheduled, the purpose of that is going to be billed or needing another appointment or specialist or whatever. So to have like this 90-minute container to be able to have him ask me questions, and I had filled out a questionnaire ahead of time of any different medical history details and things that I was curious about, was super helpful. And then he was just game based on his experience and knowledge. He's got a lot of years practicing, but he also has a long history working in kind of the pharmaceutical research area, which I found to be really interesting and exciting too. He was game to run this experiment. So I actually got 2 prescriptions. I got one for the semaglutide and one for the tirzepatide. I never ended up taking the tirzepatide, and they've actually taken it off of the market as far as the FDA and compounding pharmacies. So it's still around by the brand names and available for the normal medical society, but you cannot go, as far as I understand, and I think this is nationwide, and get a prescription for tirzepatide from a compounding pharmacy anymore. And I know we're using lots of terms and we've unpacked them before, so I won't, necessarily do that in this video as well. But I found that to be interesting. And if you remember, that was one of my theories, that this was going to start to happen, meaning in this third-party area of medicine, they were going to, reduce potentially our access to these things, especially in the way of being able to get them at micro and low doses in comparison to the standard dosing schedule. So as a reminder there, for semaglutide, the standard starting dose is 0.25 milligrams. I started at 0.1. I did that for a whole month. I then bumped it up to 0.15 because I wasn't really feeling any of the negative consequences, and I didn't really see any weight loss or changes that were notable. And then I went to 0.2 in that second month, and then I felt the negative consequences. I felt nauseous. I really didn't want to eat. I had, like diarrhea and things like that. Not fun. So then I pulled back to 0.15 again. And then I'm pretty sure for that third month, I went back to the 0.1 because I did see some changes as far as weight loss and whatnot. So I've actually been off of semaglutide for almost 2 weeks already. So it's been the 90 days, and then we're almost 2 weeks into kind of that next phase, which in my mind was going to be a month long, going off of it to see, have my cravings come back? Have I gained any weight back? How do I feel? All of those things. So just recapping, I'm down 14 pounds when I started. I'm down 3.1% body fat.
And is that today, or was that at the end of your 2 weeks?
That was on Friday, so 3 days ago, but still over a week out of taking my last dose. And I haven't seen a number lower than that, and it's been about the same as the time before that I weighed in.
Okay.
So this weight is good for me. I feel great at 145 pounds. I feel really good at 18.5% body fat. I'm not having any issues with my cycle. I'm not having issues with energy depletion. I'm not having crazy cravings, although I could see where that could return. We had like an off eating day yesterday where like a treat for us would be Papa Murphy's pizza. And then I bought these really clean and ethically sourced chocolate. And then we had some ice cream in the house too. And it tasted good. Not so much where I didn't feel like I was in control and like it would get out of control or whatever. But then I also felt like shit afterwards, to be fair. So whenever I have sugar these days, I'll get a headache pretty immediately. It won't last for long, and it's not like super intense or anything, but it's definitely a physiological symptom that I'm like, okay, my body didn't actually like that. I like the way that it tasted, but it's not sitting right in my system anymore. And then I can feel when I eat things that probably are just highly processed, again, feelings at least of temporary bloating or the inflammation come back as well. So from a diet standpoint, I'm eating pretty clean. I'm still strength training. I'm not really doing any cardio. And I mentioned that I've been doing some like bartending and serving. So I had really high steps. That has actually come down too because I haven't been working in that area as much. So I'm probably like 10,000 steps or less per day on average, which isn't ideal. And now that I have that data, then I can do something with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then the strength training side of things, I was either doing 2 or 3 like hour-long strength sessions, if I remember correctly. And then when I started this whole process, I knew that my energy would likely dip. And so I went to this programming where it was like 15 to 20-minute sessions where basically I do 2 moves per day. So today I did barbell squats and then a
Mhm.
close grip bench press
Okay.
and 4 sets of one and 3 sets of the other. And I'm trying to lift heavy. I haven't really lost strength, although I wouldn't say that I'm hitting any PRs either. So
Mhm.
just kind of cycling through normal kind of programming. That was a lot. Do you have any questions or thoughts?
No, I find it fascinating. Well, yeah, a couple thoughts or questions. The sugar, the idea that once you detoxified from that, of how your body responds. So, just as an added benefit, which was one of your little theories of, inflammation. Sugar is known to cause inflammation.
Right.
Those cravings, those hedonic type cravings that you want sugar, if you can help avoid that, detoxify yourself, that just sets you on a better path. Um, so I find that very interesting, as well as the stability, right? So 2 weeks in, from when you quit, it seems to be holding
Hmm.
both from weight and thoughts and behaviors and such.
Yeah, the biggest thing, in addition to not wanting to feel fluffy, to feel good again in my own skin, was I didn't want to have that relationship with food or have that thought power over like what am I going to eat next? And it was mainly boredom or pleasure derived. It wasn't like my body is hungry
Yep.
and I need to fuel it appropriately. And so that is how I'm seeing things now, and that is how I'm operating. I'm wondering if it'll so easily go back the longer that I'm off of it, though.
Right.
Or if that 90-day reset will allow me to have taken those baseline behavior and lifestyle changes and build off of that. Obviously, it's going to need to have some conscious thought and planning because
Yep.
whenever we don't think ahead and use that prefrontal cortex part of our brain, we'll slip back into the automated behaviors that I've been practicing for however many years now, right? Like I'm one of the typical women, and I've got 3 kids in the mix too, that has ebbed and flowed in weight. I've never been obese where I've had 100 or 150 pounds to lose. But I think at my top, I was somewhere between 211 and 217 with a full baby in my belly, mind you, like ready to deliver. But still, that's more weight than I needed to have on my shell. And I remember at one point, probably still in my drinking days, that I was maybe like 180 pounds and really frustrated with where I was at. So to be 180 versus 145 pounds is like probably 3, 4, 5 sizes on my
Yeah.
body, especially because I probably have a lot more muscle, which is denser these days as well.
No, that's excellent. And the idea of the conscious awareness, right? The one thing you'll have to be aware of and measure as you go forward, though, is that like life's stressors, right?
Yeah.
Life throws stress at you, and then you default to the
Which,
energy.
I've had no stress in the last like 4 months. Like there's
Well, that's good. That's
for
perfect.
anyone, no, for anyone that cannot sense that's 100% sarcasm.
Right.
Like life is stressful. I haven't had anybody close to me die or anything like that, but my stress level didn't wasn't unchanged or it was unchanged. It didn't necessarily increase. Maybe in some ways it did, but it's not less than when I started, just because of normal complexities of everyday life and
Yeah.
relationships.
But just being aware of that and measuring going forward, knowing that that has to be a control variable because it can skew everything, both from your thought patterns and then the idea of moving towards pleasure or away from pain when you're not
Yep.
consciously thinking of stuff. And
Mhm.
eating and behavior and diet is one of those simple things of pain or pleasure. It's just
Yeah,
Easy.
and because I've taken away substances, that's like a default for me. That's the one that left is sugar or processed food. And it's engineered in a way to make our brains temporarily happy
Mhm.
and crave and want more of it too.
Yeah. Nope.
Yeah, when I've been talking with clients, because they've also been curious as I've shared openly about my journey, I think the one thing that I wanted and the one thing that I ended up getting was just divorcing the pleasure from food. And that has been very freeing. And for that alone, I'm really glad to have gone through the experience. I'm also super happy with the way that I and the doctor prescribed and dosed the medication. So I started at what is less than half of the starting dose that somebody would get it from their regular physician. And I didn't ever get up to a starting dose.
Hmm.
And then I came back down when I didn't feel like it was working well with my body. So like that just, I think, shows the power and the individualism of medicine and prescriptions. And I really have this belief in starting as low as possible because we can always go up,
Hmm.
right? But if we start too high, it's harder to come down and to get maybe the benefits that we were looking for or any benefit at all if it reacted negatively and we decided to not try it for a
Agreed.
longer period of time.
So what's the next steps?
So the next steps is to finish out the 30 days and to really, I'm not gonna like be obsessive about the scale. I never tracked, even though I meant to. Best laid plans, right? Um,
Right.
from like a food perspective, I thought that I would log everything and kind of like when I was competing, that was one of the ways that helped me to become successful is to really understand exactly what I was putting into my mouth. I've definitely been filtering things through a protein first mindset. So when I am hungry or when I am eating, making sure I'm getting adequate protein sources in, or that's one of the first things that I'm choosing, especially for more meals. And I don't really snack anymore. I think that's a big change. So it used to be 3 meals and snacks in between, and partially out of just the desire to eat something because of the boredom or whatever. And so I don't eat as many times per day, which I think is hopeful. Um, and where else was I going with that? I don't know.
30 days. The goal is to stay on the
Oh
30.
yeah. Yeah. And then if I find that I'm, up to 150 pounds, 5 pounds heavier than where I'm at right now, then obviously I'm not maintaining the results. So
Hmm.
then something has to change. So I wanted to track, but I'm also glad that I didn't because I don't think that that's a realistic lifestyle for most people in the population. Like it's always helpful to track for a bit to know, hey, what am I actually fueling myself with and what could change in order to get the results that I want.
You
And
get
you
a
can remind
baseline.
yourself by tracking for another week or whatever every so often. But
Mhm.
nobody wants to do that day out in, day out for the rest of their lives. It's really strict and hard.
Right. Understood.
Yeah.
So at the end of the 30 days,
Mhm.
is the idea to cycle back on? Is the idea to wait and see? Like what's the assumption?
Yeah. I mean, I think in the back of my mind that I would cycle back on, especially because I dropped a couple $100 on another prescription. So
Yeah, well,
I
that's
don't really
not
want it
gonna,
to
yeah.
necessarily go to waste. And if I can kind of stay on top of it, that would be great. But this goes back to the conversation that you might hear people posing the question, like, is this a lifelong medication?
Mhm.
Right. And I think that that's a really interesting question for a couple of reasons. One, it's interesting that we're worried about it being a lifelong medication for this particular thing, which is, in my mind, a bit more natural than your pharmaceutical lab produced drugs, because it's something naturally occurring in the body, a peptide. So it's more of mimicking, more of like an HRT, a hormone replacement
But
therapy.
is it a natural peptide that, or is it synthetically made? I mean, is it a synthetic version of it or?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's synthetic. So it's like
Mhm.
half a dozen, whatever that
Yep.
saying is. And I could become more educated on that. So I am not a doctor. This is a disclaimer. Meet with a
Right.
medical professional. I'm just sharing my experience for entertainment purposes only. Um, but most people that get on a statin or they're getting on medication to lower their cholesterol or lower their blood pressure or whatever, they don't really blink an eye at starting it and being on it for the rest of their life. I think the average 60-year-old is on 10 to 15 prescription drugs, and none of them are short-term in nature. I
Mhm.
don't think that that's super helpful either. So, we don't, it's been around like these peptides 20 to 30 years, depending on where in the family of drugs you are. Like there's newer versions of them that are continuing to come out. Generations, I think maybe is what they call them.
Mhm.
So I don't know that we know enough. Plus, art, if you think about it, the last 30 years, the American society and the way that we live has changed pretty significantly, right?
Yes, definitely.
It's continuing to go in that direction where we're not raising our own food and even cooking our own food a lot of the times anymore.
Mhm.
So we're not really sure what's in the food that we're eating is a big part of it. But I would argue that I don't think that I will need to be on it for the rest of my life. But if I used it as something every year or three or every quarter or something in order
Sure.
to kind of like rebalance and it was enabled me to maintain a healthy weight, like I'm open to that.
Right. No. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially if you don't develop any imbalances internally from it. Like some of these things that you take, your body starts to respond contrary to it.
Right. Yeah.
Antacids is an example.
Tell me
You're
more.
well, if you take like your classic Rolaids, your bicarbonates, your things to neutralize acid,
Yeah.
your body, your stomach naturally produces those and dumps them in your stomach to neutralize acid. But as you start taking all these exogenous, these external sources of it, then the body doesn't produce as much.
Because it's depending on that.
Yep. So it shuts off the natural production of it because you're already getting it from the outside. So now when you stop taking it, you're not actually getting enough and you actually have worse heartburn.
Right.
And
So that would
so,
be a really interesting piece to look into more deeply. And I don't know if I'm the right person to do that or if I just ask the questions from
sure,
these healthcare professionals that actually have this medical background and access to these studies and the research. But I think that that would be really interesting to dig more into. The other thing that I wanted to bring up when it comes to lifelong medication is like it might be different for somebody that has been obese since they were four, right? So if
hmm
they had never really been metabolically sound or fit,
hmm
I don't know how their body, if it can recover from that and heal completely, and then to produce the things that it needs to have this. Ultimately, that's what your body's always trying to do, right? Is to achieve a state of homeostasis.
Yep,
And
correct.
it's miraculous at how our bodies can heal themselves, especially with proper lifestyle habits, including nutrition. So
Mm.
there's a lot of unknowns, and then there's a lot of like person to person specifics
Yep,
that we
yep.
can talk generally about, but I don't know that we'll ever really know the true answers to.
Yeah, and so it's very important that the people listening or you and everyone understand the use cases are unique. I think
Yeah.
that's what you're alluding to. And when you
Mhm.
when you align use cases, so you don't want to paint things with a broad brush. You see that with back pain or different things all the time. Everyone
Yeah.
says, "Oh, I had that," or "My cousin had that," or "My husband had that." It's like, well, no, they had something similar, but it
Right.
doesn't mean it's the same path, doesn't mean it's the same solution. And so when use cases match up, a lot of times the results equal uh, the outcomes of the previous ones, but oftentimes the use cases aren't the same.
Yeah. So when you go back to the cycling thing, just to dig into that for another moment, the entire idea would be to wean yourself off of it or stop taking it. In my case, it's such a minimal dose that I don't think that weaning really made any sense. And then to have your receptor cells still be receptive to the medication, then you're taking a break, right? So that's
Yep.
what cycling is I was on it for 3 months. I'm going to be off of it for a month, or maybe I'm off of it for 3 months, or I guess the whole wait and see is just to see how my body responds. But I'm not necessarily wanting to inject myself with anything if my body is able to naturally take care of itself with the support of the good lifestyle habits that we've been talking about this whole time.
Yep. And so this is peeling back more of those, trying to make those unknown unknowns known unknowns so that you can dial in and figure out the answer to them.
Yeah. I think this experiment was a total success. I feel good.
Yeah.
I'm happy with the results that I got. I know we poked kind of into some other use cases like addiction medicine and whatnot, mental health potentially, and those are some of those unknown unknowns that like are theories and would have to dig into more and probably have a longer turnaround time than 90 days and being able to see on the scale 14 pounds and 3+% body fat.
So how do you extrapolate, like for folks listening, and again, not giving medical advice or
No
anything?
medical advice. No.
Yeah. So, but what's the takeaway here that folks should consider? Because we've touched on a lot of things,
Yeah.
and the idea of this is ideal for people that are, metabolically sound from your
I think
own.
it's just more effective
Yep.
at lower doses, especially, right? So,
Yeah.
I think the takeaway would be like you need to decide for yourself what are your goals
Hmm.
and what are your options potentially to get there. I listened to a really, really good Mel Robbins podcast, and she shared this on the internet. So she had contemplated getting a boob job for a long period of time and ended up getting a referral from one of her friends that had a successful experience and then ended up going with the same surgeon, didn't do any of her own outside research and ended up choosing a different type of implant. And she had asked if he could just do a lift. He told her no, that was impossible, yada, yada, yada. She went through this 4-year ordeal with having implants that were way larger than she wanted. And she was very assertive in the size that she wanted with her physician and then ended up getting them removed. And the podcast is really good. And it actually talks about like regrets. And so you can apply it to anything in your life. But the reason that it comes up for me now and the connection that I want to make is that you need to do your own research, but you really have to know what it is that you want. Where are you starting from? What are the potential pros and cons and all of that good stuff? But I think that weight loss medications are something that can really help our population at this period of time where we have a lot of processed foods, we have a very fast-paced, stressful, busy lifestyle, and a lot of people that I know are not starting from a place where they're happy with their body. They feel like their eating habits are maybe a little bit out of control, and that just white knuckling through it isn't working or hasn't. I think there's a lot of education, though, that still needs to come into that lifestyle side of things and what is healthy weight loss as well. Because, and we've touched on this in the past, this will not work for somebody that doesn't make the other changes. So let's say that you have 100 pounds to lose and you don't strength train and exercise and you lose that 100 pounds, 30 of those pounds are going to be probably muscle.
Yep.
And so 70 pounds is fat and 30 pounds is muscle. If you then went off the medication and you regained your 100 pounds, you're going to probably have gained 100 pounds of fat. So you're 30% fatter, or whatever the math is when you actually do that. It doesn't always work out that way. You're 30 pounds fatter than when you started.
Yes. Thus some of the negativity you hear about, but it's not in the right context. You have to put it all in the right context, and you did a great job of.
Yeah, and you can do that by calorie restriction alone, by the way. You don't even need GLP-1s in order to lose that 100 pounds and not do the other things that you need to and regain your weight. This is a diet crazy cycle that many women and many men have been on for decades now. And it's harder every time we go through it as well. So,
Yeah, because your body develops those baselines and different. It goes through that experience. So
yep. Yeah. But your body wants to be healthy, I think, and this could be a tool in a toolbox that you could experiment with the right help, with the right research. I think again it was a useful experience and experiment for me, and I'm happy I did it.
no, it was great, and I appreciate you taking me along on the journey. So thank you.
All right. Well, if there's other questions, feel free to put them in the comment section. Otherwise, I'll maybe do an update in another month or 3 and just check in with how things are going. Thank you.
See ya.